In this video, we'll be working on this 1952 John Deere Model R diesel. So stay tuned and we'll show you what we're up against. So again, what we have here is a 1952 John Deere Model R diesel. So this is John Deere's first diesel tractor. So you have a horizontal 2-cylinder diesel engine down here, which is monster pistons. And in its day, they did not make a starter strong enough to spin it over and heat the engine properly. So what they have is this gasoline 2-cylinder pony engine, they call it, that is used to start the main engine. So taking a look here, you can see the exhaust. The antifreeze cooling system is shared with the main engine, so it runs through the pony engine and down through the main engine to help warm the cylinders. Also, the exhaust on the pony engine here runs through the air intake of the main engine, heating up the air as it's coming in to help make starting easier for the tractor, especially in really cold weather. So what you do is, and I'll do a video once I get this all back together, but the gasoline engine is started up. You pull a decompression lever on the main engine, and then you pull another lever that engages the small engine to the flywheel on the big engine, and you let it crank for a period of time. And that's slowly warming up the big engine. Now once you get it up to a little bit of temperature after around 15 to 30 seconds or so, depending on the air temperature, then you release the decompression lever, and now the fuel starts flowing into the main engine, and it should start. So the problem we're having with this one is you can see there's quite a bit of oil buildup around this area, and that is coming from this pony engine. We'll walk around to the other side here, and I'll show you what we're up against here. So I've removed the flywheel cover on the pony engine, and when you come here, if you can see that, and you pry up on it, you get quite a bit of movement on that flywheel. So that's from the rear main seal on this pony engine. So the problem is these engines have a bushing instead of a bearing, and that bushing doesn't get adequate oil flow, so it wears out. And once it wears out, you get a clearance issue between that and the seal, and from the crankcase pressure, it starts pissing oil out that rear main seal. So our task is to take this pony motor off and flip it over and take it apart and see what we need to do to get it back up to snuff here so it's not pissing oil. So in order to do so, it's really not much to it. It looks like there's a lot going on here, but there's just a couple linkages here for the starter and stuff for the battery. Obviously the exhaust and the cooling system are all attached, but really all we have are 1, 2, and then 2 more bolts on the other side, so 4 bolts that are bolting this to the main case. So we're going to go on the other side and show you where to drain the oil on the pony engine to begin this process. So 1 second. So here we are set up on the clutch side of the main engine, looking at the pony motor. So right here we have our oil fill for the pony motor. Here's our fuel tank for the pony motor, so I'm going to go ahead and unscrew that and get it out of the way. Give myself a little bit more room to operate. And then right here is our drain plug. So that is a 5/8 inch bolt, and it's a long plug. So we pull out that plug and it'll drain the oil from the pony motor into the main crankcase of the big motor. So that's what we're going to do right now. There we go. I can hear the oil dripping into the case, the main case of the big engine now. So there's our oil plug. So we'll set that aside and let this drain, and we'll start taking apart some other stuff. So we'll catch you up in a second here. So I've started unhooking some of the linkages here. I took off the linkage for the starter, took off the linkage for the carburetor and the pony there, and I realized, you know what? I ought to go ahead and disconnect my battery cables before I short something out back here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right up here. The battery on this tractor is underneath the seat up in the driver's station. So we'll go ahead and disconnect those and bring you back. So what I'm working on now is getting the cooling system released. So I siphoned out as much of the antifreeze as I could out the top. So I'm loosening up our hose clamps here, loosened up our hose clamps here, and I'm looking at this thing here, and it looks like my best method here is going to be to unbolt this. So then this, you know, the fuel pickup for the pony motor stays separate because we got this middle fuel line here I don't want to break. So unbolt that, let it hang off to the side, and it looks like if I unbolt these here, this will slide out and we should get a coolant drain coming down here. And I do have a catch pan down here to try to catch whatever I can. I know it's not going to catch everything, but we'll do what we can. So we'll show you how that looks in a second here. All right, I've got everything unbolted there, so I'm going to tap it with a deadbolt to see if I can free it up. Looks like there's an old gasket that's sticking it together, so see if we can make a mess. There we go. All right, I'm actually gonna go grab a funnel and see if I can funnel that stuff into the bucket. I'll be right back. Well, I got that pipe off, and as you can see, there's still quite a bit of coolant in the block of that pony motor. So I managed to catch most of it in the catch pans, a little bit of escape, but I put that cardboard down ahead of time to, you know, try to lap some of that up. So what we're gonna do now is take off the front sheet metal and see if we can't get to the drain plug for the radiator. So I'll take that apart and I'll catch you up once we get that exposed. Upon further review, I found out that I do not need to take off that sheet metal, but there is a coolant drain plug right here running through the casting here. So we're going to get our big pipe wrench, or our big adjustable wrench on there, and pop that baby loose and see if we can drain out a few gallons of coolant here. 1 second. Well, we only made a little mess when we pulled that drain plug. There's quite a bit of pressure there. This thing holds 14 gallons of coolant, so I successfully drained off about 4 gallons, put the plug back in, and it looks like the coolant level has come way down up in the pony motor, so we should be good to go. But may wind up having to drain off more. I'm going to sweep up this mess a little bit here, and then we'll get back at it. Alright, so now we're going to work on getting our air cleaner off for our pony motor there. So just slowly chipping away part by part. So we'll show you where we're at each step along the way. Alright, got our air cleaner out of the way. Now we're going to move over here and take off our battery cables from our starter there. And we will unbolt the starter mechanism that hits the flywheel on the big motor there. So we'll get that all loosened up and then bring you back and show you the next step. All right, our battery cables are off, and I unbolted our transmission from the flywheel. Now I'm going to move on and unbolt these coolant passageways here. So I believe those are coolant passageways, so there's one on each side. So we'll go ahead and loosen those bolts and get that all set, and we'll catch you up and show you what the next step is. All right, so I've unbolted just the top 2 bolts on each side, so hopefully that's enough so that when we lift this off, it'll actually lift off. Otherwise, we'll have to take out the bottom 2 bolts as well. I'm just trying to save on as many gaskets as I can as I'm taking this apart. So we will move on to the next step, which is going to be trying to figure out how to free up the exhaust pipe here. So we'll get on that, and I'll bring you back when we're done. Well, actually, the exhaust came apart rather easy. So I just unbolted that flange down there, and up here, this just slid in and slid out pretty easy. So that was done. So now we're going to move on to the other side here and start working on freeing up our engagement linkage for the transmission on the pony, you know, attaching to the, or engaging the flywheel on the main engine. So it looks like there's a couple pins down there, a couple of springs we need to remove, so we'll get those freed up and we will bring you back. All right, I removed that spring. This little carriage bolt was all that was holding in the linkage down there, so there was no nut on the bottom, so we're going to go ahead and probably get the right part for that. I have a feeling that wasn't factory, but we'll look into it when we put it all back together and see what we got. So now I think all we have left to do is unbolt our 4 big bolts for the block, and it should be able to lift off. So I'll unbolt those, and we'll just check and see to make sure that it's all free, and then I'll show a video of us lifting it up with the winch there, and yeah, that'll be that. And then we'll start tearing apart the pony itself. All right, so I got my 4 main bolts out. I'm trying to wiggle the pony motor and there's still no movement there, so looks like there's a couple bolts under here I still have to unbolt to separate this plate from this housings here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that and see if that gets us to where we need to be. So I'll catch you up after we've done that. All right, we took out 3 bolts down there. It looks like there's actually supposed to be 4, but one of them was missing, so we'll go ahead and replace that when we put everything together. But we actually, if I can get my screwdriver in here, we actually have movement here. So we're gonna go ahead and get our overhead hoist here hooked up to it and see if we can lift it off. So I will set up the camera once we get that hooked up and show you how that lifts off and moves. So we'll bring you back in a few minutes. All right, so here's what we have come up with. We bolted the chain to that bolt there. We actually changed course here and we put the bolts back in here and unbolted down here on both sides. So we hooked the chain like that. In the back here, we slung the chain under through the middle and hooked it with a carabiner. So we should have full support here. I have my load leveler here from Harbor Freight. So I'm going to put you all on the tripod and show you how this thing lifts and moves. So we'll get you back in a second. All right, and here we go. Pete, if you just want to go on that side for starters to make sure that we're not hitting anything. Yeah. We'll go up nice. Easy, right? Hey! So we wound up taking off the flywheel cover and unbolting this plate down here, and we're free now, so we'll put you back on the tripod and we'll do the lift. All right, we're back. We're gonna try this again, take 2. Okay, again, make sure we're free of all cables and whatnot.
Sorry, this cable is over the spark plug.
Do I have to come down?
No, you're okay. I got it free.
Twist. I got it away. Okay, I'm over it.
All right.
Are we good? Can start sliding this way?
Yeah.
Something.
It's weird. It's not actually funny.
I know. Is there just like a bolt hanging down there or something?
Oh, yeah.
All right. What you feet?
You just want to move the pallet towards
No,
it.
wait. There we go.
There we go.
Take the cord. All right, we got it. So here's what the OR looks like without the pony motor on there, and I just wanted to point out, here's what was basically in the bottom of what you'd call the oil pan. Look at that layer of just goop down there. So we're gonna go through and obviously clean all this stuff up, but I just found that rather disgusting. So yeah, there's that. Now we'll get into tearing the actual pony apart. All right, now that we got her on the ground, we're gonna go ahead and take off the housing here for the transmission, leaving the flywheel on there. So we'll take that off just to separate that, and we'll show you what that looks like when we're done. All right, we got the transmission separated from the pony. Did discover a problem. Our bearing here, it's pretty noisy and a lot of slop there, so that'll have to be replaced. Now we're gonna work on getting that flywheel off. So we'll check back when we got that. All right, we've taken off our our wire that was holding everything together there, unbolted our plate there, and now we're going to start taking apart our clutch. So take that off. We'll remove our springs. Take off our pressure plate. And we have now exposed our nuts. We're gonna go get a big old socket and see if we can bust that guy loose. So we'll catch you up once we do that. All right, flywheel is off. I wound up having to run to the hardware store to get an 1.5" socket to get that nut off. Didn't take too much. It's on a tapered shaft, so I just took turns wedging a screwdriver behind it and tapping on the crankshaft and back and forth, and it finally popped off. And then had to wrestle with the woodruff key a little bit. So that's all good. Now the next step is going to be to go around to the front side and pull off the magneto. So we will get that going and check back in. So here is the rear main seal, and it's hard to tell in the picture here, but got quite a bit of movement here. So that is where our oil leak is coming from. So that is ultimately the biggest thing we want to fix, along with all the other stuff. All right, magneto is off. Just 2 bolts holding that on. I marked my spark plug wire so I know which side is which. Next step is I got to remove this vacuum line, and then we're going to take off the front of that housing there. So we'll check back when that's off. All right, that cover is now off. Got all my bolts sitting there, so I'll put those back in the holes where I took them out from, but now we've got our gears exposed. So yeah, we'll move on to the next step. We'll catch you on when we're done. So next here, we're going to work on getting that crankshaft out. So in order to do so, I have to take off our oil pump gear, our governor, this is our crankshaft right here, and our camshaft will have to come out too. So we're going to get to work on that, and I will show you how we got there. So I just realized I never took off my my connecting rods here, so I got to go ahead and unbolt those and get them free from the crank, and then we'll go ahead and work on getting the rest of that stuff out. So stay tuned. Well, we had to take apart a little bit more than I had hoped for, so I wound up having to take off our manifold on top there to get to the back bolts on the connecting rods there. Took off the heads in order to pull the pistons out. I was going to take the heads off anyway, it's no big deal, but I just did that a little bit early. I did discover that, I don't know if you can see that there, but we have standard pistons in there, so I'm going to go ahead and get new rings. I will check the board to see how close we are to needing to be rebored or whatever, but main thing is I got the crank out, and as you can see, there's our rear end of the crankshaft there, and you can see just how scored that is. So no wonder she was leaking out there, and can't really show you the bearing, but the bearing is just as bad looking in there too. So we're definitely gonna have to get that turned down. How much, I don't know yet. I'll have to take some measurements, and we will see what we need. So I still do have to get the governor cap, I guess you'd call it, on there off. I'm going to need to get a puller for that. So that's all for today. So I'm going to have to go get myself a puller, and then I will get that off, and we'll take a look at that other bearing. So yep, that's where we are as of now. So I'll catch you back up once we get our puller and get that popped off, and we'll take a look at the other side of that crank. All right, I went out to Harbor Freight and I got myself this Pittsburgh 3-jaw puller set. It actually was pretty reasonably priced, $34 only for 4 pullers. You get a 3-inch, a 4-inch, a 6-inch, and an 8-inch puller. And I used my 6-inch here to get my gear and cover off here. So now I can pull the crank out the rest of the way, and I'll show you how that one looks once I get it out. So stay tuned. Alright, so here's the whole crank. So yeah, you can see this side is grooved too, but not nearly as bad as the back side. So we're going to have to go and either get that turned or turned down to size if I can find the right undersized bushing, or get that welded over and then turned to factory spec. So it all depends on what size bushings I'm able to find. But on the plus side, taking a look at the actual rod bearings, those look pretty good. So I think I can just go ahead and use my current ones, and we should be good there. So we just have to worry about getting the ends of the crank turned and getting the right bushing. So I'm gonna do some research, see what I can find, and I will get back to you with what we're gonna do. All right, we're back the next day. So I did a little research last night, and as it turns out, this part number means that this crank was already bored or turned 20 thousandths down. So I got there by searching the part number on Google and talking to some guys on some forums, and that's what we came up with, because this part number actually doesn't match what is in the parts manual. So at some point after the parts manual was written, that part was superseded, and there's not really much record of it. But best I could determine from online was this bushing is available, and it is listed as a 20 thousandths under bushing. So like I said, I've got some feelers out there trying to find out what exactly I need to do. So there's a possibility I may need to get a whole new crank. Guys mentioned I could get that spray welded and then turn back to normal size, because you can still get the stock bushings. So I'm still examining what I need to do out there. So we'll get back to you on that. But I did this morning take a look inside the pistons here, inside the cylinders, and I mean, they look pretty good. Little bit of marks, up and down marks here from the piston, like down the center, bottom and top here, but on the sides, it's hard to see in the picture. I mean, you can still see crosshatch in there from the hone job. So I went ahead and I measured everything with a bore mic, and we are at 2.604 in all dimensions on both sides. So we are really close. So I think I can just go ahead and get myself a ball hone, clean up some of those scuff marks, and go ahead and get another set of standard rings and use those. So that's good news. And again, I mentioned the rod bearings there look pretty good. So assuming I can still use the same crank, I shouldn't have to replace rod bearings at all. But that has yet to be determined. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to get to work on some other things on the tractor, and I'll take you along for the ride there, but we'll fill you back in on this portion of it once I get some more answers. So stay tuned. I've decided to make this a multi-part video. So we're going to end this with the tear down of the pony motor here, as we're determining what parts we're going to do and what direction we're going to go here. So once I figure that out and start ordering some parts, I'll take you along for the ride as we clean things up and start putting stuff back together. So thank you all.